So this is Guido from the Gold Trainers, the True Potential podcast in turbulent times. Today we got no one else than Sydney Leijenhorst. Sydney is a 40 years Qi-gong practitioner, teacher, karate sensei, so many other things. Sydney, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And yeah, you're in your let's say your house or your castle at Kenkon, which already exists for more than 3 decades. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me see. I think in 1988, then I decided to really live from this, to do what I do now. So that's more, I think even more. And yeah, before that, it was more like a martial arts school only. So when I took it over in 1988, I integrated all my other passions like meditation, Qi-gong, and things like this.
Yeah. So for the listeners, watchers, I'm standing because the last seminar that I followed from you was a standing Qi-gong. So in this interview, I was like, I'm not going to sit. No, like the last time we really met, I stood for 2 days with you. So I was like,
yeah, we had a good time.
yeah, and we were standing just still by the gratitude that we have for being together, because that's not possible during these times.
Yeah.
So how are you dealing with it?
I think okay. I mean, like, of course, in the beginning, it was a bit of a shock, like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And you had to work extra hard to respond to the developments. Like in the beginning, we were still rolling, of course, and you had to take all kind of hygienic actions, and then the thing closed down further. So then, of course, all the groups stopped, and because about 50% of the income in Kenkon comes from rent, so then we had to respond to that change. Are we going to survive this, or what can we do? What support can we get from the government? What alternative activities can we do? How do we continue to help and inspire our members? So that was the next stage. And now I think step 3 was really getting an online schedule. And we got that now since April 1st. And that feels like a little bit like, okay. So now we have this online train rolling. Now I can relax more. Now I'm getting gaps of time now where I can write things as a support for the online session, which is something I've been longing for. I usually don't have enough time for, but now it seems I'm getting a little bit more time to do this. So that's really nice. And it's called social distancing, but actually in the online scene, it's the opposite. The opposite is happening because, first of all, it works very, very well, surprisingly well. Of course, there's something special about being together in the same room, but I also get a lot of positive feedback on what the online sessions actually can do. So that is very, very positive. But also, like many students, because Kenkon has decades of history, so there's also several old students that now live in other cities or live in other countries. They are joining in the online trainings, and I have taught seminars in different countries, and I have a lot of international contacts. So also people from, like yesterday, I think we had just a small group, but there was someone from Germany, someone from Poland, and someone from Italy, I think. Yeah, so that's really nice. I mean, and I always enjoy international groups. So that's very nice. And actually also through the Corona crisis, I have my whole family at home. So I have 3 sons, and the 2 oldest one did not live at home, but because of the Corona crisis, they're also living at home, and that's really wonderful. So I'm actually having the opposite of social distancing.
Social really coming together. It's like social gathering.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, we will get a financial blow, and I don't have a clear figures yet, about how big that will be, and if we will be able to deal with it. We just have to see, but we just keep working on it, and then against this, when it's summer, we'll see probably what the damage is, and then we can see how we can continue from there.
Yeah. So you started with martial arts, right? So it was karate, and was it other things as well next to that?
No, well, the first thing was actually judo.
Judo.
I mean, I wanted to do kung fu, of course, because there was the era of Bruce Lee. So who didn't want to do kung fu?
Yeah.
I wanted to do kung fu, but my mother thought it was not such a good idea. She thought it was more for aggressive men, and somehow she didn't like aggressive men. So it was, so when I was 12, I started with judo, but then, you know, when I grew older, I think 16, it was Shaolin Kempo and kung fu and karate. So that's when the martial art started. And when I was 16, I also started meditation. And then I think in my early 20s, Qi-gong came around. So those are the three things that I still do.
Yeah, so it unfolded from judo, karate, and then meditation.
Yeah. So it was like when I started martial arts, I was immediately interested as a young boy in the backgrounds and the philosophy of these martial arts. So I think I was maybe already 14 when I was at high school. I started reading books about Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and these things. So that's how I got interested in meditation. And in those days, there was a form of meditation called transcendental meditation, which was Hindu-based, but it was like adapted for the modern Western world. And that was also somewhat popular because the Beatles did it. And then when I was 16, I saw a course in meditation, and I did that, and that was the beginning of my meditation practice.
Yeah. So a lot of people might not really know that a lot of martial arts, I think everyone, is like rooted into inner work as well.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, it always also depends on the style and on the teacher, how much that is stressed. But if you look at the history of the traditional martial arts, there are various points in history where you can say the spiritual traditions of China, or in this case, and the martial arts tradition came together and influenced each other. And that's why things like breathing practices, energy work, but also mind practices became part of the martial arts.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, like when it came to the West, you also saw the change that people interpreted as a sport rather than a martial art. So then it became more a sport, and those aspects around personal development became less important.
Mm-hmm.
So also the breathing methods, the energy work, the meditative dimensions were not always taken to the West.
No. Like we tend to focus, or the West tend to focus on the external part, right? The hard part and the physicality.
Or competition, just getting good at competition. And of course, getting good at competition and challenging yourself and doing competition can also catalyze personal development, but as you can say, it's a different personal development, and it's not always consciously navigated.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, the exploration happens maybe more outwards than inwards.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what's the reason that you started with meditation? I mean, I know now already, like a lot of people don't really have this clear picture for what meditation really is. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we sit down with our eyes closed, we can do many things, but some people think that you're always meditating when you're doing that. So mm-hmm. What's the reason that you started so early, so to speak, and with your meditative journey?
Yeah, I don't remember actually. I mean, I was just I think I was just more like, kind of mesmerized by the atmosphere around the martial arts, the kind of inner peace, the wakefulness, the stability of mind that somehow radiated from those practices and from the people who did those practices. And I think it's almost more on an intuitive level, I think, that I was drawn to it. It was not that I had a conceptual idea about well, this is not going well, let's do this, and then that will be better. That's not how it works for me.
No,
And
no,
I,
no.
you know, and that's not how my life evolved anyway. I sometimes semi-jokingly say I'm an intuitive organic manager, yeah, and that counts for Kenkon, but also for my life. So I usually don't have like a very clear concept and plan about where I want to go to and how I want to get there, what steps are needed to get there. That's usually not how I work. I mean, I might work like that on a small scale, but in general, if I look at my life, if I look at the development of Kenkon, then it's a very other type of process.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's way less about making rational plans.
Yeah.
And how would you actually describe then, like from karate to meditation? That was very intuitive, and then
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years later, you started your Qi-gong practice. And
Yeah.
how did that?
How did that happen? Well, you know, like yeah, before that, I think that was at the beginning of my physiotherapy study. So that is you can say the more Western thing that I did. I started to do some Tai Chi Chuan, what people usually know as Tai Chi, but actually the full name is Tai Chi Chuan. And I think I also read about Qigong probably in books. It was not very well known in those days, but I'm sure I read it in magazines and books. And then I'm not sure, I might already be a little bit involved in traditional Chinese medicine, but anyway, around that time in my early 20s, I did see an advertisement of a Qigong seminar that was organized, I think, by some kind of acupuncture organization. And so I thought, you know, Qigong. So I was curious. I didn't really know what it was about, but I was curious. So I went to the seminar. And I still remember there was one thing that really, you know, set flame in me, and that was the aspect of spontaneous movement. So in that seminar, we learned like a set of movement, yeah. So like, you know, all Qigong systems usually have a set of movements apart from other practices. But there was also a moment where we had to take a certain posture, like in the, you know, the last pre-corona seminar. Yeah. And then the instruction was, you know, if you feel something moving inside or it begins to move your body, just let it happen. So, and this was like a completely new instruction for me to begin with, because I was used to do things consciously doing this, consciously doing that, but I was not used to allow things to happen so much. That was not in my what I've received until that point.
No.
And then at some point I could feel all kind of, like, I remember kind of spiraling energy movement inside of my body. And at some point my body also started to make those movements. And that was such a surprise to me, you know, like, what is this kind of feeling? And I still remember, like, in that moment, I immediately had the thought, this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. And so far, so good. Still with me.
So yeah, that's like 40 years ago, almost.
Yeah, it must be. And now let me see. Yeah, I'm probably around 36 years ago, I guess.
36 years ago, and still going strong with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly enough, you know, I met several other teachers afterwards, and quite a few of those teachers all worked with spontaneous movement, which is not like mainstream Qigong. Like mainstream Qigong is mainly consciously doing certain movement and minding your breath, minding relaxation, sometimes also minding the energy work and things like this. But it's usually what I call guided practice. But somehow, like the probably 2 or 3 teachers I met afterwards in the West and in China, they all worked with this phenomenon of spontaneous movement. So this has been a really important artery in my life of practice and research. What is this? How does it work? How can you help people to experience that? What are the possibilities of it? So, things like that.
Yeah, how does it work then? Because I think spontaneous movement is like, it sounds like, okay, you just do things that are in you, but could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, so like the way I learned it first was just go into a posture and allow whatever wants to happen inside or outside. That's it. That's simple. Yeah. And for me, somehow that happened, and it felt very natural. So even though sometimes, in the seminars afterwards, I would have really sometimes very powerful movements, or sometimes very fast movements, or sometimes very weird movements, I was somehow not hindered, like I was not blocked by it, because it felt so normal and so natural to me, that to me it was a very easy thing to do. Yeah? But of course, the way people are conditioned on average, yeah, is not like that. Yeah, we are on average, we are conditioned in a way that we do smart things, and we do it consciously, and we can control the situation, so it happens. That's because that is the usual mindset, and that's a good mindset too, but it's a very different mindset from allowing things to happen, going with the flow, and channeling that flow to a good place. That's a very different mindset, or a very different approach to things.
Yeah.
That even though I was not educated like that until that point, I somehow my nervous system, or whatever it is in me, recognized it as something very good and something very, very natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, but of course, if you work with people, you cannot do that with everybody. That will not work for everybody. I mean, even in that group at that seminar, I was one of the few people who had that sensitivity and that ability, because it was also under the influence of the Qi-gong healer, it happened. But it was only a few people. So me and I think 3 other people were actually kind of put into in the circle as a kind of catalyst for the rest of the group. Yeah, so it doesn't work that well immediately with everybody. Right? For some people, you need a kind of, you can say you need steps and pointing out instructions that help people to slowly get a feel for it. Yeah, and slowly build trust that whatever is happening in them is okay. That's a good thing. Yeah, so that differs from person to person. So that's also why, in my ongoing classes, I work with it, but not to the full extent. If I want to work with it to the full extent, or really want to explore all the possibilities of this spontaneous movement, then I will usually do it in the context of a seminar. Yeah. But I'm not an online seminar.
Exactly. I said something
that was just the word.
Yeah. Is it something that you're gonna do as well, or do you know that like in the near future some online longer Qigong practices or other practices?
Oh, you mean online seminars?
Yeah.
Or spontaneous movement seminars?
Yeah, in the broader sense. In the broader sense. Online seminars.
Yeah. Well, I will start thinking about that soon. Because now since April 1st, I have this online schedule, and I already have, let me see, 1, 2, 3 Qigong sessions and a Tibetan yoga session. So that's rolling now. And of course, the weekends now are empty as well. Of course, before the Corona crisis, I had several weekends where I would either go to a seminar or I would teach a seminar. But that's, of course, all out of the window. Yeah. So now there's new space to think about what can I do and what want I do with the weekend. So just like I said earlier, I'm going to do a retreat soon first, myself, just lock myself up in Kenkon and do practice and write and practice and write and practice and write. So that's the first thing. But after that, I can see, okay, what kind of things and how would it work to do more than just one session? Maybe, do a whole day on Qigong online. Would that work? Or do a whole day on karate? Would that work? A whole day of meditation? So that's my next step in thinking about what are the possibilities. I presume, this Corona crisis will probably go on at least for 2 months, I guess, at least. So Yeah, so I might come up with webinars for one of the things that I do towards the end of this month. And actually, because there's so much positive experience with the online teachings, I actually think it will stay, you know, also when all this is over, when we can hug and fight again, yeah, then I think actually we will continue to have online sessions because it's such a wonderful opportunity, which has its own impact and its own possibilities. Like, for example, the social bonding aspect it actually has.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's. I mean, we're giving sessions as well, and what I was like directly impressed by was right the amount of variety that comes to your qigong lessons.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I mean, I saw in
yes,
the
so
Kenkon
nice.
area, I never saw those numbers and the different amount of people. Like, so much variety.
Yeah, yeah, very nice. Yeah,
Yeah, fascinating,
yeah.
fascinating.
So
So
just be
is
curious,
yeah.
what are you then now doing online? Do you also use the, you know, the, how do you call them?
The bars.
Racks? Yeah,
Actually, that's the only thing that we use less and less
yeah, of course,
for
because,
the because
yeah,
not everybody has that in their house.
no, probably not. Most of them not, I
So
guess. Yeah,
there are a lot of people that have a space on the floor, so we do a lot of exercise on the floor.
yeah,
Core strength, push strength, leg
yeah,
strength, balance, mobility, endurance.
right.
We combine those aspects.
Yeah,
Very, very little bar work. We send a video now and then. How can
uh-huh.
you actually do pull strength without the bar? And
Yeah,
then we have different
right.
ways for that. Yeah,
Yeah, same
yeah,
here, of course. We have all kind of tools, but people don't have them all at home, so we work more with the body now.
yeah, exactly. I would actually love to join once if that's possible.
So
But
yeah,
yeah,
sure.
that would be interesting. But
Yeah.
let's. What I find also fascinating is like you have also a very different approach how to deal with external circumstances. Spoke about it a little bit. Let's say there will be a couple of tips, like Sydney's best tips to deal with this crisis. I'm very curious. Like, what
Okay.
would you really give as insights,
Yeah.
personal advice, something like that?
Okay. Well, let me think. First of all, two things. The first thing that come up to my mind immediately is one, have a good rhythm in whatever you do. So don't push yourself to do the same thing for like 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. Yeah, this is what I used to do when I was younger. Yeah. But you know, like for example, for me, what I often do here, you know, I might work half an hour behind my desk and then I walk away from my desk. Maybe I do a half-hour practice, or I do a half-hour of building care, and then I come back to my desk. I'll play manager again, and then after half an hour or something like that, then I go to, and so that's how I cycle. Yeah, and that keeps my body mind, if you like, keeps it relaxed and flowing. Yeah, because if I do, for example, the manager work, I do it more than 1 hour, then something gets stuck in me. Yeah, and the same if I do building care for more than an hour, then something gets stuck in me. So I developed a way of going through my day in which I stop before that point, before I get stuck. Yeah, so it's important that you know for yourself and that you recognize when you get stuck. Yeah, and then adapt to it. Yeah, and sometimes I might have, you know, like a lot of energy and really inspired about something. Then I take it a little longer. Yeah, because then it doesn't make me feel stuck. Yeah, so the one thing is the rhythm. The second thing is maybe the flexibility. Yeah, so you don't go, okay, half an hour, half an hour, half an hour. Yeah, but you also kind of let it depend on what it is and how your energy feels. It's like, for example, when I'm really tired, then for example, I pick things that are easy to do. Yeah, I don't pick the things that really need me to go like this. Yeah, therefore I need a little bit more vigorous energy. But when I'm tired, I take it a little easy. So rhythm, flexibility, and then of course practice. You know, that really causes a change in your body-mind state. Yeah, so make sure that you have enough moments when you do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to always be like an hour, you know. I mean, I try to practice at least 2 times, something like an hour per day at least. But even if you have a very busy day, you don't really have time to practice, then you can still, you know, just do 5-minute chunks in between all the busyness of your day. And just walk outside and do 1 Qi-gong exercises 36 times, and then go back to your desk. And then after half an hour again, walk outside, do the next Qi-gong exercise at 36 times, and then walk back to your desk for a busy day. Yeah, so that will be the third thing. Yeah, so rhythm, flexibility, body-mind practice. Yeah, and I really stress body-mind practice. And so make sure you have practice in your life that doesn't only changes your mind, but also changes your energy and changes your body. I think that's really important. Anything else? Yeah, I guess social contact. I mean, like for me, I don't have to think about it now because I have my whole family at home, and you know, they're all very joyful and loving people. Yeah, but I think that really helps me also in these days. So if that's not naturally there, then that I think would be a fourth important thing. And of course, I also have it through the online sessions. Yeah, that's also, I have social contact.
Like sort of community.
Yeah, a community feeling. It can be, you know, you can maybe just have a few good buddies, yeah, or maybe you like bigger, maybe you like international, and just everybody is different. And the final thing is something I don't use, usually don't use enough to my own estimate, and that's connecting to nature. Yeah. So now it's okay for me because now it's the weather's getting nice, so now I meditate outside. And then I get this, at least some connection to the nature. But I don't tend to go out to the woods a lot, or sometimes I bike through the fields. I would like to do that a little bit. It would be good for me to do it a little bit more. Yeah, so that's, I would say, is the 5th golden rule to survive the crisis. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else that is important to me. Yeah, I think that there's two more things come to mind that I feel are important in my life and how I deal with it. One is frequently connecting to my sources of inspiration, yeah, which are like my teachers. So always when I meditate, the first thing that I do is I connect to, you know, the people who have been important to me in my life, who inspired me, who learned me essential things. That's one thing that I do. And there's a sense of gratitude in that. And so I feel and I express gratitude. That's one thing. And also for me, it's important to frequently, you know, ask myself, am I really fully, or at least as much as possible, doing the things that I really like to do and that I really have to do? Yeah, because sometimes you can get in a kind of habit and only doing the things that seem to be important, yeah, and then you get out of touch, you know, with where your core passion is, but also where your key gifts are, you know. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
How do we have 7 now? 7 is a good number.
7 is a fantastic number. So your key gifts and to follow them. And is that something that you do on a structural basis every month, every week, or the 7th?
No, that's more, you know, something I reflect on every now and then. Yeah, like for example, I used to have a habit. So I do it in small ways and in big ways. But to give an example of a big way, very often around New Year, which to me is a kind of period, is a good period to really look at your life. You know, everything becomes more quiet. nature's letting go. So that always feels like a good moment for me to really look at my life and see, am I still doing what I want to do? And am I still delivering my key gifts? And for example, one way I did it several years is that I would buy a big white paper, and then I would just start to write everything that I'm doing. And during the writing, you know, you get thoughts and feelings and images and memories coming up. And then sometimes I would notice, I write it down and I don't really like this anymore. You know, so then it would help me to make me more aware, more precisely aware, what is my relation to that particular activity. And that would then maybe be inspiring me to do that less or to drop it altogether. So that is like a big way of reflecting on it every now and then. Yeah, but also now, somehow, you know, like actually somehow the Corona crisis works a little bit as a catalyst for me, because already for a long time I had this kind of wish, you know, it felt a little bit like this for two things to share. And one is what I call the integral warrior workout, which is how can you do physical workouts, you know, of whatever nature, in a way that integrates the, you know, my experience from body work, energy work, meditative work, these kind of things. How can I integrate them even more fully outside, also outside of the context of karate? Yeah, of course, in karate, I work with these dimensions more than the average karate teacher, but I wanted to explore, okay, how can you take it out of karate and just say physical exercise, but make that a really integral practice, so which has not only body work dimensions, but also has energy work dimension, has psychological dimensions, and has meditative or spiritual dimensions. So this was something, you know, was working in me, but didn't came out. Yeah, so you could say it was a ripening, but it was not expressing. And I actually had this, I was coming closer to the moment of expression, but still went like this. I thought, well, maybe after the summer, this summer, I can do it. I can release the expression. But now, because it's in the Corona class, somehow I thought, no, let's not wait anymore. Let's just do it. So now, in April, I started this session, and I hadn't developed the integral warrior workout yet. So I'm actually now just developing it on the spot. Yeah, and afterwards I make notes. So this is also, a completely different way in how to say, honor what I have to give or honor what I want to do. And the other one is Tibetan yoga. So I teach Tibetan meditation, and in those classes, there's always a little bit of Tibetan yoga, like one or two little exercises, but there's a really interesting, rich body of knowledge with more physical, spiritual exercises in the Tibetan tradition, which we would call here Tibetan yoga. Yeah, and that's also something I've been longing for many years to refresh that and to share that. And that also was something, well, maybe after the summer, but now I did the same thing. I just jumped and we had our first session last week. So yeah.
Cool. I will experience that the first time this Friday. So that's every Friday at 11
o'clock. Yeah.
And then it's 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's a 90-minute one.
Yeah, awesome. I would love to experience the warrior workout also as a session. That is possible, right? For people that are no karates? Or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So far, I only had karate people, but the idea is to, not to keep it only for karate people, but to open it up for just physical exercise in general.
Yeah.
And I might use simple martial art things as well, like, like a punch maybe, or some footwork that might be a part of the practice. Yeah. But it's more about the underlying idea or the body-mind dimensions of the practice. Like, for example, in the last session, I worked with something I actually called the Shisa principle. Yeah, you don't know what Shisa is, not a Shisa lounge, but Shisa is like is an Okinawan lion. So in Okinawa, if you see many houses or buildings, they have two lions, and one has its mouth closed and the other one has its mouth open. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of idea behind that, that if you want to have a healthy and prosperous or otherwise good life, yeah, you need to hold on to what is good and you need to keep out what is bad. It's a very simple dualistic principle. Yeah, sometimes dualism can be very good. Yeah, and also when you do a physical practice, you know, when it gets challenging, and I'm sure you know that because you've been there. You know, of course, you get distractions. Yeah, distractions you can come from outside, yeah, or you look for them outside and you find them outside, or they can come from inside. Yeah, simple things like, you know, the burn, yeah, whatever muscles you're working with, the burn can become a distraction, and your mind can contract and start to wrestle with the burn, just like in the standing meditation. Yeah. So the idea here is, you know, stay with what good. If you have your focus, if you feel, you know, the focused, calm space of your mind, then make sure you stay there. That's holding on to the good. Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to ignore the burn. You feel the burn, but you're not going to be distracted. Yeah. So it's not the burn becomes the leader of the exercise. Yeah? So this is kind of in short, one of the aspects of this, what I now, last session, I called it the Shisa principle, which was for the first time I called it like that. But yeah, so this kind of things, yeah, it's not only about karate, it's in every sport. Yeah, in every sport, this is a good thing to do. Learning to stay with what is good, keeping out what's bad is a universal principle. Yeah, and in that sense, another one, just to give an example, you know, we did exercises where first you go slow, medium, fast, and then spinning out of control. Yeah, and that last step is a really interesting one. How can you do a movement in which you allow yourself to spin out of control and then feed on the energy that is released from that? Yeah, maybe you recognize what I'm saying here. You can have it also, for example, biking. You know, when you bike and you feel like you want to bike really hard and the road is free, you go shh, and then, you know, something in you begins to release, and it gives you even more power to go further, to go faster. Yeah, so this is like you're feeding on, but on that energy that is released because you're going bananas. Yeah, and if you keep in your controlled state, you might go fast, but you don't get that extra. Yeah, you don't get that liberating extra. Yeah, so again, this is an example that, you know, works in biking. Yeah, but of course it can also work in karate. Sure. Yeah, but it's the idea here is bigger than karate.
And that, yeah, it starts from karate, but there's like a you call it integral warrior workout.
Integral
right?
warrior workouts, yeah. So the word integral here means, you know, integrating different dimensions of who we are or where we can work with it. So our body is one dimension of who we are, obviously. Yeah, I see a body. Yeah, and well, our energy is an aspect, our breathing is an aspect, our emotions are an aspect, our mind is an aspect. So those are aspects of our being, and we try to integrate them into our practice. Yeah, which is common. I mean, like the word yoga, yeah, which in the East has a bigger meaning. It means union. It comes from the word yuj, yeah, and yuj is like a yoke for oxens. You know, like if you have 4 oxens and you want to make sure they go all the same way, yeah, you need to bind them into a union. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same idea. Right? So that's almost the same as the word integral.
Yeah, that's very, very fascinating actually, that the word yoga, if you call it in the West, like people see already all kinds of difficult stretches on mats, and that's the whole studio idea has become so much like, yeah, I would say almost like it's taken out of the whole picture, and it's just focused so much on that physical stretching part of yoga.
Yeah.
And maybe now a little bit of breath work, but there's a whole dimension to it.
Yeah, depends on the school and the teacher, as always. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I agree. There's a big stream in the Western yoga world that's become very slick and empty.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to fully agree on that. And it's so interesting that for me, at least, you were saying like, okay, so I'm also next to meditation. I'm gonna do Tibetan yoga now in classes, and that's already something that is in you for a long time. Or when did you start your own Tibetan yoga journey?
Oh, I'm always very bad in, like
more or less.
linear.
How did it develop? Maybe a better question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so first, I think I met my first Tibetan teacher about 30 years ago. So this was I was invited by a friend of mine who I knew through Qi-gong. I was translating for a Qi-gong teacher in England. That's how I met her, and she invited me to come to her teacher, Ramachimi. And immediately I was kind of caught. I had certain visionary experiences and dream experiences. And I had something, I guess this is my teacher. I didn't really understand what was happening, just like when I had my first spontaneous movements. I was not really, I didn't have so much of those type of experience. So that is when I kind of became hooked by Tibetan Buddhism. So Tibetan Buddhism became my core inspiration. I was still looking around, but this became my mainstream. And let me see, it was in the Schimmelpenninck period. So I guess somewhere in the early 2000s. I remember I was kind of looking at, okay, I'm doing Qigong, but it doesn't have the same spiritual depth as the Tibetan Buddhism that I'm practicing. And I was kind of looking for a connection between those two arteries in my body of practice. And then I bumped into a book by Dakshe Tulku, who was then an 80-year-old Tibetan, what they call a reincarnated Lama or reincarnated teacher. And he wrote a book with, for example, Tibetan yoga exercises. But the interesting thing was that he was not only a reincarnated teacher, he was also a practitioner of Qigong and Tai Chi Chuan. Actually integrated, or he himself already integrated some aspect of the Chinese tradition with his Tibetan tradition. So for me, that was like exactly what I was looking for. I was looking to connect these two traditions. So there was an address in the book, and I wrote a letter. This was the time we still had letters. And it was okay. I could come, so I did a seminar with him. I hang around maybe a small week. Had a really intense exchange with him. He gave me permission to teach those practices. And I think this was maybe this was the beginning of Tibetan yoga. And with Tibetan yoga, I mean here the spiritual practices from Tibetan Buddhism that involve bodily movement and bodily postures. I think it was the beginning, but somewhere around that time, and it could actually be earlier. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't have a very clear linear memory. It took me 10 years before I was certain that my wife's birthday was on the 11th of May. And but anyway, I also like one of my important teachers still for 25 years is Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And the first time I met him, I also learned Tibetan yoga exercises, which are called Tsalung, and Tsalung means channels and energy winds. So it could also be that that was the start, but that was kind of around the same time. So we talk about 20, 25 years ago.
Okay, so it's also quite a while already. Just an exploration. I feel such like an, a student when I speak with you about these things, like I told you once, my grandmother also teaches yoga for almost 40 years now. And I have a little bit of similar feeling, and I don't want to compare you with my grandmother.
I don't have gray hairs, you see. There's not even one gray hair here.
No, exactly. It's fun because there, like the last couple of years, there has been this huge load of information, but not like in books, but like that has been coming through me from meditation, but from practice. And I feel like I'm really at the beginning stage of my exploration. And when I have this conversation with you, for example, I really feel like, wow, there's so much embodiment on different levels to it. like, yeah, this is a journey of a lifetime.
Yeah,
And
it has been. Yeah.
I get very excited from conversations like this.
Nice.
And I'm for sure, like, yeah, without saying the exact time, but let's say when you started with Kenkon, you knew different things than you know now.
Sure.
And let's say we were speaking with that Sydney right now, or you had a conversation with Sydney that just started out with Kenkon. And could you give that version of yourself some insights, what he back then didn't know, and what would be very helpful to take with him on board in the journey of creating Kenkon?
Okay, interesting question. Well, you know, one of the things I certainly didn't know then, yeah, is what I said at somewhere at the beginning of this talk when you asked me, can you give people advice of how to navigate a crisis? Yeah? You know, the things I said about make sure you get a rhythm, make sure you get your body-mind practice going, and these kind of things, that I certainly didn't know then. I didn't know how important that was. You know, so there has been a time, especially when I started to build up and it wasn't bringing in any money, and I was a you know, a husband and a father, so I needed to bring in some money. That, of course, it was a tough time. So there has been a time that I worked 80 hours a week. You know, like, and at the end of the day, I was kind of sitting in I remember sometimes I would sit in my IKEA chair and I think, oh my God, and now I have to teach all night. Yeah. Or sometimes I would teach, like there was a period on Wednesday, I would teach 6 hours nonstop, no food, sometimes even no drink. You know, so that was stupid. Yeah. So from now, you would have a good talk with the Sydney from then about, you know, making sure you have a rhythm, you have a healthy rhythm. And like when you know, at some point I woke up, you know, I saw that I cannot keep doing this. You know, it's not fun, because then I was doing everything. You know, I was doing cleaning the toilets. I was, you know, making sure the tax got paid and everything. So at some points I woke up to the fact that this is not working, and then I started to change. So, for example, one of the first things I did was putting 15 minutes between 2 classes. You don't have to be a genius to do that. For many years, it just didn't come up in my mind, you know, because I had this kind of hardworking, maybe warrior mentality. You know, you just have to keep going and you don't give up, and this kind of, which of course has beautiful sides to it, but there's clearly pitfalls to it. Yeah, and luckily I didn't get burned out. Yeah, for whatever reason, because I was blessed with a lot of energy, or of course, at the same time, I learned things that helped me to regenerate as good as possible, which can be a pitfall in itself, but that's another story. But that's the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, so giving me, the Sydney of now would give the same advices about reading, the body-mind practice, that certainly. Yeah, I guess, you know, I remember from those early days, you know, when I had to take care of my own administration and the tax payments, I was so not good at it, yeah, that when I had to do it, it drained me, you know, like I had to put so much energy, and I would kind of postpone it, and then it would even cost more energy to clear the mess up again. So that's certainly another thing. And I would either tell the Sydney from that time, either, you know, make sure you keep it clean from day to day, yeah, so it doesn't become a pile, yeah, yeah, or just find someone that can help you with it, yeah, who takes it over. And of course, now I have people, you know, I have an assistant, and we bring it to the accountant, so now that's more easy. But that would certainly also be an advice. And part of this maybe also, do not ignore the signals. Yeah, do not ignore the signals. That's, I think, is also a big one, you know, because there was one time I had in this period where I, you know, was really in the building up phase. Yeah, so I would wake up in the morning and my first visualization was not a Buddha, but was my task list. Yeah. So as soon as I would wake up, I would have the task list in the sky.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of Buddha.
A different kind of Buddha. But I somehow I started to feel less good, and I didn't know what was going on. So I was not fully ignored. I tried a few things, but it was not really, I was not taking it serious. I was not listening to the signals. And I still remember, I actually had an anemia. Yeah? So which means the blood doesn't hold the oxygen. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I started to adapt, that's what I did. So when I would bike from home to the dojo, I would just go slow. I would bike like a Tai Chi because that was the only thing possible at that point. Yeah, so I was just adapting. But meanwhile, the anemia was increasing. I didn't know it then, but that was what's happening. But I was adapting instead of acting. Yeah, instead of finding a solution, instead of making sure I know what is going on here and what can I do about it. I was just kind of adapting and going on. Yeah. At some point, I was even doing, I think, a 4th degree black belt grading. I was supposed to do that, but then I think it was my wife who pushed me at least see a doctor so you know what's going on. So I went to the hospital, did a check. And actually the next day I got a call. They called me and I said, I have to pack my bags immediately and come to the hospital because I only had, I think, 3.6 millimole per liter, and that's lethal. Yeah, so that's lethal. Yeah. So then I went to the hospital and they gave me blood transfusion and they did all kind of tests. They didn't find anything. Yeah, but after that, I think actually maybe 1 week or 10 days after I came out of the hospital, I ran 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
And I just stopped because I thought, this cannot be good. Because before that I couldn't even run 400 meters. And after I was running 10 kilometers and then I just stopped. I thought, I don't know what's going on here, but I just stopped. Yeah, just to be sure. But then it went away. I mean, I did have a consultation with a natural healer, a good friend of mine from England, and she had an idea about what was going on. So then it was healed. But what I'm saying here, as an advice, take the signals serious.
Take the signals serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels like a very solid advice. And I also feel that, I mean, there are so many things to speak more about and to dive deeper about. At the same time, I had the feeling I had to make this interview in snippets, and maybe we can do a second part in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
So we have also, I wanted to directly use the advice you gave in this talk, that you don't do things for very long and then it feels like you're stuck somewhere. And now I feel like this is a good flow and it's a very, very strong advice to finish this interview with. So, good. Sydney, thank you so much for your words and your presence.
Yeah. And
I would love to see you for sure tomorrow at the yoga class and in this afternoon already for the Qi-gong.
Yeah.
So, see you then. And what's the best way for people to participate in one of the online sessions?
If you want to participate, you should send an email to me, to Sydney@kenkon.org. So SYDNEY at Kenkon is KENKON.org, O-R-G. Because first of all, I want to have some kind of idea who's coming in, what's their experience, so I'm not letting everybody in. Yeah, so I just want to know if they're dedicated, if they have some experience. So that's one. But also, I'm developing all the support materials, and if I have their email, I can send it to.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why that is the best way. That's why I'm not putting the links on Facebook, for example.
No, that's. I think that's clever that you do that. And maybe we can add an empty schedule without the links that people know already when it is. Yeah. Let's do that. Sydney, thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye bye. Have a good day. Keep up the good work.
Soon.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye, Sydney.